I've been married to Laura for 5 years. We had a decent life together in a cozy suburban neighborhood, a classic American dream setup. I always thought we had the kind of relationship you read about, where the couple faces challenges, learns from them, and comes out stronger. But lately, things had started to feel off. Laura was acting strangely distant, often glued to her phone, and I could sense an underlying tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, I convinced myself it was just work stress. She had recently been promoted to a managerial position, and I figured the demands of her job might be taking a toll. But as days turned into weeks, the feeling of unease gnawed at me. I noticed she'd started to dress differently, skirt suits that clung to her curves in ways that made me feel both proud and uncomfortable. And the late-night work meetings. They began to pile up like a suspicious mountain. Things came to a head one fateful evening. I had just returned from a long day at work, drained and craving a home-cooked meal. Instead, I found Laura in the kitchen whipping up something extravagant. It was unusual for her to cook, but this felt different. She was in a great mood, laughing at her phone. I tried to engage her with a casual, "What's so funny?" But she shot me a look that said, "Back off, buddy." That was new. I waited for a moment before deciding to check my email, maybe even share a laugh about something funny I had come across. Instead, my gaze drifted to Laura's phone, which sat unattended on the counter. The screen lit up with a notification. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make it worth your while." My heart sank. I felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. I forced myself not to act on impulse. I told myself to breathe, to think. But then curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone and looked through her messages. At first it was innocuous small talk until I found his name, Matt. My blood ran cold and the room spun. The messages morphed from friendly banter to something far more intimate. I read about their secret rendezvous, their plans, and his promises to make her feel special. I couldn't process it at first. A part of me wanted to scream, but I held back. Instead, I decided I needed evidence. Over the next few days, I went into detective mode. I watched her every move like a hawk waiting for its next meal. Every late work meeting, every excuse to stay out late. She didn't know I was keeping tabs. I overheard her talking to friends about how boring her marriage was and how exciting life was with Matt. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. The tipping point came on a Friday night. I had decided to stay home, pretending that I'd be totally fine with her going out to celebrate a coworker's promotion. I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just another excuse to meet up with Matt. After she left, I grabbed my jacket and followed her. I could barely contain my anger as I trailed behind her to a local bar. I parked a few blocks away and walked, heart pounding. When I finally entered the bar, I spotted them sitting in a dimly lit booth, laughing, leaning in closer, the kind of intimacy that lit a fire in my gut. I wanted to walk up to them to confront them, but I needed to keep my cool. Instead, I watched from a distance, taking mental notes. Eventually, they stood to leave and I followed them, my emotions swirling from hurt to rage. They walked hand in hand toward her car, and at that moment I realized I had enough proof to confront her. I watched as they kissed. My wife, who had promised to love me, was now giving her heart to another man. When Laura came home that night, I was waiting for her, arms crossed and heart pounding. The look on her face when she walked through the door was a mix of fear and guilt. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice steady, but inside I was screaming. Her eyes widened and I could see the gears turning. I went out with Jessica," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Laura, I saw you with Matt." Her expression shifted from fear to defiance. "So what if I did? You've been so distant." "It's not my fault you can't keep up." I felt a rush of emotions, hurt, anger, betrayal. This wasn't just about the affair, it was everything, the lies, the deceit. I needed a plan, something that would make things right again. As I sat there, my emotions simmering, I realized I had two paths before me. I could either confront her with tears and begging or take the route of calculated revenge. I decided on the latter. It was time to make sure she would end up alone while I found my true happiness. To be continued. After the confrontation, I was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger coursed through me, but beneath that burning rage was a profound sadness. The woman I loved had shattered my trust, and I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a heavy stone. Yet, I knew that wallowing in despair wouldn't change anything. I had to take control of the situation. My mind raced as I formulated a plan. I decided to gather every piece of evidence I could find, not just for my own vindication, but to ensure Laura would face the consequences of her actions. I began by scrutinizing her phone, text messages, and social media. It didn't take long before I uncovered a treasure trove of incriminating conversations with Matt. They were so careless, flirting back and forth, planning future meetings and sharing intimate details of their lives. I printed out the messages, saved photos, and even a few screenshots of their social media interactions. I felt like a detective piecing together the story of a crime. I wanted to make sure that, when I revealed her infidelity, it would be impossible for her to deny it. I wanted Laura to feel the sting of her betrayal, to understand the depth of her wrongdoings. Meanwhile, I took on the role of the dutiful husband, cooking dinner, asking about her day, and pretending everything was fine. It was exhausting, but I knew I had to keep up the facade. I wanted to catch her off guard when I finally revealed the truth. I wanted her to think she could continue her affair without a care in the world while I was quietly plotting my revenge. As days turned to weeks, I noticed Laura growing more and more comfortable with the lies. She'd come home late from work with the same excuses, her phone constantly buzzing with messages that she was careful to shield from me. I could see the confidence in her eyes, she thought. She was getting away with it, but I was ready. The real moment of execution came when I planned a date night. I suggested we go out for dinner like old times, and she was thrilled. Little did she know, I had planned everything down to the last detail. I made a reservation at a nice restaurant, and when we arrived, I suggested we take a seat at the booth in the back, a secluded spot where we could talk. She sipped her wine. I casually brought up how our relationship had changed, how distant we had become. Laura, oblivious to my true intentions, launched into a rant about how boring our marriage had become. The words stung, but I kept my composure. I wanted to ensure this night would end on my terms. Then I dropped the bombshell. You know, I've been feeling like we've been drifting apart because of your late nights. I mean, who is Matt? The color drained from her face. She stammered, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" I slid the printed messages across the table and watched as her expression shifted from confusion to horror. "You're cheating on me." "Laura, do you really think I wouldn't find out?" Her eyes darted back and forth across the pages, and I could see her mind racing. "This isn't what it looks like," she started, but I cut her off. "Really, because it looks pretty clear to me. You've betrayed me, and now I'm ready to make sure that you face the consequences of your actions." Her panic turned to anger. "You went through my phone. That's disgusting. You're invading my privacy." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "You invaded my trust the moment you decided to sleep with another man. Don't try to flip this on me." The tension in the air was palpable. The other restaurant patrons turned to stare as our argument escalated. I knew the scene we were making was public, but I didn't care. I wanted every emotion, every ounce of my anger to be on full display. As we left the restaurant, I decided to take a different route home, one that would lead us past Matt's apartment. I wanted her to see where her double life was taking place. I could feel the heat radiating from her as she realized what I was doing. "Are you seriously going to drive by his place?" she asked incredulously. I didn't answer. I simply turned the corner and parked across the street. I could see the window of Matt's apartment and knew that if they were together, it would just be a matter of time before they came into view. I wanted her to see the reality of her choices, to confront her with the truth of what she was throwing away. Eventually, we saw them. Matt and Laura, laughing together, leaning against each other as they headed toward his front door. I could see the way she lit up around him, the way her smile radiated joy that I hadn't seen in a long time. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I was furious, but more than that, I was heartbroken. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. "Do you see him, Laura? Is he worth losing everything we built together?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. She looked at me, a mixture of fear and defiance in her eyes. "This isn't fair. You're making this so much worse." I felt A mix of triumph and devastation wash over me. I had achieved what I set out to do. I had forced her to confront the consequences of her actions, but it wasn't enough. I needed to ensure she faced the fallout fully and completely. I had a new resolve to make sure she ended up alone while I found my true love, to be continued. After that night, everything shifted. Laura was still trying to play the victim, claiming I had invaded her privacy and ruined everything. But I was done listening to her excuses. I felt a surge of power that I hadn't experienced before. I was no longer the passive husband. I was determined to take control of my life, and that meant executing the revenge I had been plotting step by step. The first part of my plan was to gather more evidence. I knew Laura would try to cover her tracks. I started to pay close attention to her routine, tracking when she would go out, how long she took, and where she went. I even enlisted the help of a few close friends who were willing to keep an eye on her if I couldn't. I felt like a secret agent gathering intel on my own wife. One of my friends, Jake, managed to catch her one afternoon at a cafe, sitting with Matt. He sent me a quick text and I felt a rush of validation. It was one thing to have suspicions. It was another to have solid proof. Jake's text confirmed what I had suspected all along. The affair wasn't just physical, it had become an emotional entanglement. They were meeting under the guise of friendship, but it was so much more than that. With each new piece of evidence I collected, I felt like I was fortifying my case. I wanted to confront Laura again, but this time, I wanted her to be left speechless. I wanted to show her that her betrayal affected more than just me. It affected our entire life together. I spent the next few weeks preparing for the ultimate confrontation. I spent hours assembling a dossier filled with every text, photo, and message I had collected. Each entry felt like a dagger, reinforcing the pain I felt. I wanted her to see it all laid out neatly, to understand how meticulously she had crafted her lies, how she had betrayed our marriage. Finally, I set a date for the big reveal. I scheduled a weekend getaway to a cabin we used to visit before everything went south. I figured it would be the perfect setting for our final showdown. I played it cool, inviting her on a romantic trip while secretly anticipating the storm that was about to unfold. When we arrived at the cabin, I set the mood. I lit a fire, poured us both glasses of wine, and tried to act like everything was perfect. Laura seemed to enjoy the atmosphere, her laughter echoing off the wooden walls, but I could see the remnants of guilt flickering in her eyes. I knew she was still hiding something, and the tension in the air was palpable. After dinner, I suggested we take a walk outside to enjoy the crisp night air. As we strolled, the stars sparkled overhead, but my heart felt heavy. I had rehearsed how I would bring everything up, but the moment had arrived, and I had to stick to my plan. Laura, I began, stopping to face her. We need to talk about us. She looked uneasy but nodded. What's on your mind? I took a deep breath, knowing this would change everything. I know about Matt. I've known for a while. I've seen the messages, Laura. I've seen you with him. Her expression shifted again, a mix of shock and disbelief flooding her features. What? How did you find out? It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that you've been lying to me. You've been betraying our marriage. You've chosen him over us. The look on her face was a mix of panic and anger. I didn't choose him. You've been so distant. I was lonely. You don't understand. That's not an excuse, Laura. You made a choice. You chose to cheat instead of talking to me. You thought you could keep this a secret, but I've put together everything. I pulled out the binder I had prepared and handed it to her. The moment she opened it, I could see her face blench. The color drained from her cheeks as she flipped through the pages, realizing just how much I knew. Each message, each date, and each picture was laid bare for her to see. The reality of her actions hit her like a tidal wave. Where did you get all of this? She finally asked, her voice shaky. Does it matter? You've hurt me in ways I can't even describe. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too. She tried to defend herself, stammering through a series of excuses, but I was unwavering. I had reached a boiling point and I was ready to pull the rug out from under her. I deserve better than this, Laura. I deserve honesty, loyalty, and love, not this betrayal. Her bravado crumbled. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. We can fix this. But I was done. I had spent too long trying to salvage a relationship that she had already thrown away. "No, we can't. You made your choice. You chose him. I've seen the way you look at him, and I refuse to be a consolation prize." The weight of my words hung in the air, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the woman I once loved, stripped of pretense and confronted with the reality of her choices. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "This isn't about us anymore. I'm leaving you, Laura. I deserve to find someone who values me." The silence that followed felt deafening. I watched as the realization sunk in. The betrayal, the deceit, it all shattered in an instant, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was finally taking a stand for myself, breaking free from the chains that had bound me. But as I turned away, a voice in my head reminded me that the next stage of my plan was to ensure she truly ended up alone. I was ready to take action. To be continued. After the confrontation in the cabin, I drove away with a sense of finality. The pain of betrayal still stung deeply, but there was also an exhilarating sense of liberation. I knew I had made the right choice in confronting Laura, and now it was time to shift my focus entirely. Revenge was no longer just a thought, it was my mission. I had to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions while I found a path to my own happiness. In the days that followed, I began to strategize how to execute my plan. The first step was to make sure she couldn't just sweep her betrayal under the rug. I reached out to a lawyer, seeking legal advice on how to navigate the divorce process. I wanted to make sure I had all my bases covered. I was prepared to fight for my fair share, but more importantly, I wanted Laura to understand that her choices had real-life repercussions. While I was immersed in my plan, I also took the time to reconnect with my friends. The support I received was overwhelming. Jake, who had witnessed Laura's infidelity firsthand, offered to help however he could. I shared everything I had collected, text messages, photos, and the emotional toll her actions had taken on me. He reassured me that I wasn't alone in this, and that boosted my determination. As I began to pull away from Laura emotionally, I also started to distance myself physically. I moved out of our shared home and into a small apartment nearby. It was a stark contrast to the life we had built together, but it felt like a necessary step toward moving on. I wanted her to see that I was taking action. I was reclaiming my independence. Once I was settled into my new place, I started to put the second part of my revenge plan into motion. I devised a way to expose Laura's affair to her friends and family. I knew that she had painted herself as the innocent one, the victim in our relationship. It was time to show them who she really was. I compiled the evidence, the texts, the photos, and the timeline of her deceit. At first, I thought about sending a mass email, but I decided against that. I wanted to make it more personal, more impactful. I reached out individually to a few of her closest friends, inviting them to meet up for coffee. I portrayed it as a casual get-together, but I planned to reveal everything to them. As the meetings unfolded, I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. I knew I was about to shatter the image Laura had carefully crafted. I wanted her friends to see her for who she really was, to understand the betrayal she had inflicted on me. Each conversation went something like this. "Hey, thanks for meeting up." I wanted to talk about Laura. Their faces would light up, excited to hear about their friend. They always spoke so highly of her, praising how great she was, but I knew the truth and I was ready to drop the bomb. "I've been going through a tough time. Laura and I are separating. She's been seeing someone else. His name is Matt." The shock on their faces was priceless. I filled them in on the details, showing them the evidence, allowing them to see the texts and everything that I had compiled. Each time I felt a rush of satisfaction as the reality of Laura's betrayal hit them. Some were sympathetic, others were incredulous, struggling to comprehend how she could do this. I didn't want to be vindictive for the sake of it, but I did want them to know the truth. I wanted her to feel the isolation that comes with betrayal. It was clear that she relied heavily on her social circle for support, and I knew the fallout would be significant. As I shared my story, I began to feel lighter. There was power in revealing the truth. Each conversation felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my narrative. Weeks passed and the cycle continued. I informed more friends, a few family members, and even some acquaintances. The news spread like wildfire. I could almost feel Laura's world upending as she became the subject of hushed conversations and pointed glances. Meanwhile, I began to explore my own path to happiness. I focused on self-care, rediscovered old hobbies, and even started hitting the gym regularly. It felt liberating to invest in myself instead of being tied down by the emotional turmoil of my marriage. I realized how much I had neglected my own needs while trying to please Laura. I started dating, cautiously at first, but quickly began to enjoy the thrill of meeting new people. The first date was awkward. How could it not be? But as I navigated through a few outings, I found myself smiling again, laughing and feeling the spark of attraction with someone new. Her name was Sarah, and she exuded a warmth that felt comforting. We bonded over shared interests and experiences, and I began to see glimpses of the love I had thought lost forever. But even as I explored this new chapter, I kept an eye on Laura. I wanted to ensure she didn't just bounce back unscathed. I wanted to make sure the fallout was real, that she would understand the consequences of her actions. One night, as I was out with Sarah, I saw Laura at a bar, a place we used to frequent together. She was with friends, laughing and acting as if nothing had happened, as if her world hadn't just crumbled. I watched from a distance, feeling a mix of satisfaction and pity. She looked like a ghost of her former self. Her laughter seemed empty, overshadowed by the weight of her choices. That night I decided I had done enough. I had reclaimed my life and exposed the truth. It was time to let go of the anger and hurt, to move forward completely. I didn't want to be defined by what she had done to me. I wanted to be defined by how I chose to rise above it. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was on the road to healing, and I was determined to find true love, someone who would appreciate me for who I was, not who I pretended to be. To be continued. As the weeks rolled into months, I felt a remarkable transformation in myself. The pain and heartbreak from Laura's betrayal began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and positivity. I was no longer the passive victim in my own story. I was actively writing a new chapter. With my relationship with Sarah blossoming, I felt a flicker of optimism that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Sarah was everything I needed. She was compassionate, fun, and supportive, qualities I realized I had taken for granted with Laura. Our dates were filled with laughter, deep conversations, and moments that felt genuine. I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't thought possible after my experience with Laura. There was a sense of safety in being with someone who truly valued me. However, there was still a part of me that felt the remnants of anger directed toward Laura. Even though I hadn't spoken to her directly since the confrontation at the cabin, I was aware that she was still dealing with the fallout from her decisions. Friends were beginning to distance themselves, and the whispers about her infidelity had reached almost everyone she knew. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction from knowing that she was experiencing the consequences of her actions. One evening, as Sarah and I sat on the couch watching a movie, I received a text from Jake. He had been keeping tabs on Laura and noticed that she seemed more isolated than ever. "She looks miserable, man. I think she finally realizes what she lost," he wrote. I felt a pang of guilt at the thought of her suffering, but it quickly dissipated. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the repercussions. It was hard to have sympathy for someone who had hurt me so deeply. Over the next few weeks, I continued to immerse myself in my new life with Sarah. We tackled new adventures together, hiking, exploring new restaurants, and even trying out cooking together. I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. I was learning to be happy again, and it felt good. But then, one day, I got a surprise text from Laura. It was unexpected, and for a moment my heart raced. I hadn't heard from her since our confrontation, and I didn't know what to expect. She wanted to meet. My first instinct was to decline, to ignore her completely. But I was curious about what she had to say. Perhaps she had finally come to terms with her actions. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. The morning of our meeting, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. I wanted to hear her out, but I was ready for anything. I had no intention of letting her manipulate me or rekindle any feelings. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted Laura sitting at a table by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She looked different, disheveled, with dark circles under her eyes and an expression that was a mixture of remorse and vulnerability. Gone was the confident woman who had betrayed me. In her place was someone who appeared to be struggling. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice shaky as I took a seat across from her. "Get to the point, Laura," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. I didn't want to give her the upper hand. "I know I messed up. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened," she began. "I realize now how much I hurt you, and it's tearing me apart." I watched her carefully, searching for any signs of sincerity. "And what do you want from me? An apology? Because that's not going to fix anything. I'm not here for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I regret everything. I never valued what we had until it was gone. Matt was just a distraction, a way to fill a void I created. I know I was selfish," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Part of me wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, or even pity, but I felt mostly indifferent. You made your choices, Laura. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everything we built together. I don't think it's easy to come back from that." She looked down at her coffee, tears brimming in her eyes. "I understand if you hate me. I wouldn't blame you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air, echoing with the weight of our shared history. I didn't answer immediately, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. I had no interest in rekindling anything, but I also didn't want to be cruel. "It's too late, Laura. I'm moving on with my life, and honestly, I'm happier than I've been in a long time." "I see that. I've heard about Sarah. I know she's good for you," she said softly, almost as if she were trying to protect her own feelings. The mention of Sarah felt like a turning point. I was proud of the life I was building without Laura, and I wanted her to understand that I was no longer tied to the past. "Yes, she is, and I'm ready to embrace the future." As I looked into Laura's eyes, I saw a flicker of realization. For the first time, I felt like she understood the depth of her actions. I could feel the weight of our past lifting, and I realized that this meeting wasn't just about her seeking closure. It was also about me finally closing that chapter of my life. "I hope you can find happiness, Laura," I said, standing up to leave. "But I won't be a part of your life anymore." Walking out of that cafe, I felt a surge of relief. I had faced her, confronted the past, and stood firm in my decision to move on. The closure I had sought was finally mine, and I was ready to put that chapter behind me completely. In the following days, I focused more on my relationship with Sarah. We spent time getting to know each other on deeper levels, sharing our hopes and dreams. I found joy in the simple things, like cooking together or taking spontaneous trips. I felt myself falling for her, and it was exhilarating. As the relationship blossomed, I couldn't help but reflect on what I had learned from my experience with Laura. I realized that betrayal can be devastating, but it can also serve as a catalyst for growth. I had learned to recognize my worth and prioritize my own happiness, a lesson I would carry with me into the future. But as much as I wanted to focus solely on my newfound love, I knew there would always be echoes of the past. As I leaned into my relationship with Sarah, I felt stronger than ever, ready to embrace whatever life threw my way. To be continued. As my relationship with Sarah deepened, I found myself blossoming in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was no longer weighed down by the past. Instead, I was embracing the present and looking forward to the future. The lessons I learned from my marriage to Laura had shaped me into a more self-aware and resilient person. I was ready to love again, and I was determined to build a relationship rooted in trust and honesty. Sarah and I began planning a weekend getaway, a small trip to a nearby beach town. We were excited about the prospect of spending quality time together, away from the distractions of our daily lives. I made sure to create an itinerary that included all the things I had missed out on in my previous relationship: long walks on the beach, late-night conversations under the stars, and exploring local eateries together. It felt liberating to plan a weekend focused solely on us. As we drove to the beach, I felt a sense of lightness in the air. The sun was shining, and the salty ocean breeze filled the car. I turned to Sarah, who was laughing at something on the radio, and my heart swelled. For the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine happiness, a stark contrast to the emptiness I had felt during my marriage to Laura. The weekend was everything I hoped it would be. We spent hours talking, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. There were moments of vulnerability where we opened up about our pasts, and it felt refreshing to know that we could talk about anything without judgment. I felt safe with Sarah, and the more time we spent together, the more I realized just how much I had needed this connection. On the last night of our trip, we found ourselves on the beach, the waves gently lapping at our feet. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a perfect moment, and I knew I wanted to seize it. "Sarah," I began, taking her hand in mine, "I really want you to know how much you mean to me. You've brought joy back into my life in ways I didn't think were possible. Thank you for being patient with me as I navigated this transition." She looked at me, eyes sparkling with warmth. "I feel the same way. You've shown me the importance of being true to oneself, and I admire your strength." As the last rays of sunlight faded, I took a deep breath. "I think I'm ready for something more with you. I want us to build a future together, and I'm excited about the possibilities." Her smile widened and she squeezed my hand. "I want that too. I'm here for the long haul, whatever that looks like." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had finally moved past the hurt and betrayal of my marriage to Laura. I had taken control of my life, and now I was ready to embrace love again, but this time with someone who genuinely appreciated me. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to focus on nurturing my relationship with Sarah. We spent time with each other's families, attended events, and made memories together. I found myself growing more and more in love with her, and it felt incredible to let my guard down again. Meanwhile, Laura's presence in my life began to fade. I heard through the grapevine that she was still struggling to rebuild her social circle. She had lost friends who had sided with me, and I felt a twinge of sympathy for her loneliness, but I also recognized that she had brought this on herself. The choices she made had consequences, and it was a harsh lesson that I hoped would lead her to a better path in the future. One evening, while Sarah and I were curled up on the couch watching a movie, I received a message from Laura. My heart raced at the sight of her name. It was a simple message asking if we could talk. I hesitated, unsure of whether I wanted to reopen old wounds, but as I looked at Sarah, who was nestled comfortably next to me, I decided to respond. "I'll meet you, but I can't guarantee it'll change anything," I typed back. We agreed to meet at the same cafe where we had our last conversation. As I sat there waiting, I felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. When Laura arrived, she looked different, more composed but still weary. I could see the toll that time had taken on her. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I've had a lot of time to reflect, and I realize how unfair I was to you." I nodded, listening as she spoke. "I know I can't change the past, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I've been seeing a therapist, and I'm trying to understand why I made the choices I did." "Laura, it's too late for us," I replied gently. "I've moved on, and I'm happy now. I hope you find that happiness too." She looked at me, vulnerability etched across her face. "I understand. I just wanted to make sure you knew that I genuinely regret how things ended. I never intended to hurt you." As we talked, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I no longer felt anger or resentment toward her. Instead, I felt a bittersweet sense of finality. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said, "but it's time for both of us to move forward." After our conversation, I walked away feeling lighter. I had faced my past, and in doing so, I had confirmed my commitment to my future. I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, hand in hand with Sarah, who had shown me the meaning of true love and respect. Life has a way of throwing challenges our way, but it also brings unexpected joys. I learned that betrayal can lead to growth, and sometimes heartbreak paves the way for healing. I was grateful for the lessons learned, the strength gained, and the love rediscovered. As I looked ahead, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I was determined to build a life filled with authenticity, love, and happiness, one that I could be proud of. And as I took Sarah's hand, I knew we were ready to face the world together. In the end, I had not only survived the betrayal but had thrived in its wake. I had found my true path, and it was a beautiful one.